You decided to assign me to look over a fictional organization, and you thought for one little moment that I wasn't gonna do Monsters Incorporated? You fool. Alright, let's get into it. So, Monsters Incorporated is a 2001 Pixar classic that perfectly illustrates what happens to the monsters after they leave our closets. I wanted to do that in a sentence. Let me make it more simple for you. So essentially, they asked the question, right? Why do monsters come into children's closets and scare them? And the film answers that question with, well, they use that scare and for energy to power their cities. Is that an ethical solution? You know, one needs power, right? And if you have a source to get power, should you get it from an unethical source? I mean, we're dealing with that right now in our actual society. So one of the points of this assignment was look over a narration or a communication sense of the text, and the thing that I would like to look over is their propaganda. That's right, it's propaganda time. I love some good old propaganda time. So, what is the propaganda? The propaganda is that the human children are toxic, and that's why they're okay with this unethical solution of stealing the children's screams. So human children are toxic. Okay, you know, the scarers that go in and get these screams, they're cool guys because they go into toxic places. It's almost like the military in that aspect. I don't know if you know this, but the military does a lot of propaganda. But they're so cool, you know? They go into these toxic places and they get the energy for us, right? So your question is, why am I dressed like this? Well, my dude, I'm dressed as the all-time scare record holder, James P. Sullivan, also known as Sully to his close friends, and I like to think that I'm a close friend of him. I also want to make a little note here, is that the way that the monsters enter these children's rooms are through doors. And the first thing that we see in this movie that's not abstract art is a door, which is interesting to me because it's almost like the movie is about opening doors to a new way of communication through the monsters and the humans. So let's get into my notes here. So the movie opens up with a simulation. This new scarer is trying to, I think apply. I think he's a recruit. He's a recruit for Monsters Incorporated, the company, which is a company, and we're in their factory, their Scream factory. And this recruit is trying to become a scarer, and he's in the simulation. And as soon as the simulation ends, you can see that their management is angry, and I believe that most of their communication is from a top to bottom perspective, from like the top of the food chain, top of management, to the bottom union scare workers. It's angry management, and right out of the gate we're just flooded with the propaganda that the children are toxic. It's in the workplace, this narrative is in the workplace, and it's with adults that are supposed to be smart. They're literally, like, their whole jobs are surrounded by this propaganda, and it's just crazy to think about, You've got Sully, who is utterly committed to this propaganda. Again, an adult, an educated person, like we know from Monsters University, like he is an educated man. He went to one of the most top colleges in the monster world, and he is fully committed to this propaganda and this narrative. And that is just, like, insane to me, It's crazy how much this narrative is just flooded their entire world. Now, currently in the movie, there is a scream shortage, which I also find crazy because, like, how is there a scream shortage when you have two of the top best scarers in the world, James P. Sullivan, who is the best scarer in the world, and his arch nemesis, Randall, and they're supposed to be on the brink of breaking the Scream record, and you're at a Scream shortage. Like, that's insane to me. Like, I have no idea how this propaganda did not fall apart earlier. So we see an advertisement early in the film of this propaganda, and I love the tagline, "We scare because we care." And it's just totally about you making the monsters not feel bad for literally terrifying children. And it makes it like a spectator sport almost. It's insane to me. And everyone loves Sully at work. I mean, like, who wouldn't? Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Look at a big purple polka dots. Like, who could not love this guy? What's really funny to me is that we see this top-down communication, but the workers that are putting in the work, the union literally blue-collar workers, are the ones that are supposed to be in the spotlight. But they're not the ones controlling the narrative. They don't even have any idea they're a part of the narrative. A little tidbit here. One of the most iconic forms of communication for the audience is this character named Roz. And Roz is probably an older lady who is seemingly a part of the, like, paperwork department. And she goes, "I'm always watching, Wazowski. Always watching." It's a little fun moment there, a little comic relief. But I just want to put a pin in that, and I just want you to remember that, okay? Just remember that for me. Can you do that for me? Great. Another total side note, is that their propaganda isn't even good, in my opinion, because the monsters, the scarers that go scare, they go touch the doorknobs, they walk into the children's room. Like, isn't that toxic? Like, should they be dying from that? Like, okay, so there's a scene in the movie where they have a code called 2319. Also, if you want to know a little fun fact, 2319 is a classroom at CalArts that a lot of the Pixar animation went to and studied at, so that's pretty cool. In the 2319 film, there's a sock on this dude's back, and they just totally humiliate this guy. Like, they shave him, they explode the sock, like, they make a whole big deal about it. In fact, it shuts the scare floor down for like an hour and a half, like, during the Scream shortage. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that's how far they go for this propaganda. The FBI equivalent child detection agency comes in. Like, it's insane. But you're telling me that you don't have to go through that process every single time a scarer touches a doorknob? That's just bad narration, my guy. That's bad propaganda. Also, another little tidbit. I know we've been going on a lot of tidbits here, but the doors in Monsters, Inc. are actually inspired off of the Disney Laundry Service at Walt Disney World, and it's a really cool little tidbit. I just want to throw that in there. Back to the top-down communication thing here. What I really find interesting is that the top really wants to make the bottom people feel like they're important, even though they're not a part of the decision making, and they're not allowed to know the full reason behind the propaganda and everything. But everybody's bought into this. Like, there's these two, I'd assume, like, janitor worker type people, custodians, that are like, "Oh my god, the scarers are so awesome." Like, everybody is just enthralled by these scarers, but they're all on the same level. They're all the bottom, but they're made to feel like they're not. Interesting. Another part about that, the bottom is made to feel like the top, even though they're not, is the CEO, who is at the top. He is at the top level. Continuously says to Sully that, like, "You're the boss, like, you're so cool," stuff like that, like, and it's insane to me because he knows exactly what he's doing. He's making sure Sully feels like he's important, so he's not going to disrupt that top-bottom communication. Like, that's crazy. Now, more on the CEO. Also, I want to say that, like, Pixar did a freaking great job of making the CEO look disgusting. Like, Water News is terrifying. He absolutely terrified me as a kid. I just want to put in the fact that, like, we mentioned that he's the top of the top-bottom communication, right? So I'm just going to read to you his lines real quick. Actually, this is Sully's lines. My boy, my beloved James P. Sullivan is like, everyone knows that you're gonna get us out of the scream shortage. Like, I put my full trust into you because this top-bottom communication works perfectly, and you are perfectly controlling the narrative. My poor Sully. He'll learn better sooner than later. Waternoose says that the company Monsters Incorporated has been in his possession, in his family's possession for 3 generations, and he will do anything to keep it from going under. Anything, you might say. Put a little pin in that one. I know we got a few pins already. The new recruits suck at scaring, lightly put. We saw in the beginning the management got angry at them. And so Waternoose is like, hey, yo, I trained this Sully guy to be like the best scarer ever. Why don't I just make him do my work for me? So he's like, Sully, come down to the simulation room later and show these recruits how it's done, how I showed you, because you're the best, don't you know that? Even though I control the narrative? Yeah, that's what I thought. Another thing about controlling the narrative and communication here, like, it is so obvious that Waternoose favors Sully. I mean, like, who wouldn't? I'm just putting that out there. Who wouldn't? And nobody cares, because he controls the narrative. And Sully is a part of his narrative. Sully is just a pawn. My poor guy, we gotta save him. While Sully is, living life up, we see one of the doors being used outside of Times. And that's another thing. Like, this top-down management, in my opinion, it sucks. Like, your propaganda doesn't even make sense if you think about it, which, I mean, like, technically all propaganda doesn't make sense if you think about it. But your management just sucks because somebody is literally using a door and you have no system in place to know that. Like, come on. If you're going to control the narrative, control it better. That's when Sully sees the door and is like the lovable doof that he is. He goes inside the toxic human child room and he's like, hello, is anybody in here? And then, oops, my guy Sully lets in the toddler that he names Boo. And this toddler is pretty dang cool. Yeah, so Sully lets the kid in and he believes the propaganda so much that he is utterly shaking in his non-existent boots because he doesn't wear clothes. And he has no idea what to do, so he goes to his biffle, Mike Wazowski, who is on a date. My poor guy. Anyway, he goes to Mike Wazowski and he's like, I brought this kid into the world. It's toxic. I have no idea what we're going to do. And then the FBI comes, also known as the CDA, Child Detection Agency. The whole place is a mess. Like, the whole restaurant that Mike was on a date is in absolute disarray. Like, every single adult there is losing their collective minds, and like they're all panicking. It's like you would think like a terrorist came and messed up the joint, but no, it's a toddler. It's a human toddler, and they're all freaking out. Like, one of the guys on the news. Now I know that, like, we've all seen Florida Man. Like, we've all seen a Florida Man news story, but I think it's really important to know that, like, the FBI was there, like, their equivalent of the FBI was there, and on the news, this guy full-chestedly goes, I saw the human toddler shoot laser beams out its eyes. Now, first off, we're dealing with monsters that are like 3,000 feet tall, have giant fangs and multiple eyeballs, and they're terrified of laser beams. Like, how much do you think laser beams are a problem in their society that they're putting it on this human toddler? Like, insanity, if you will. And I will. People are lying, people are panicking, and it's terrible. I would also like to point here, another good point about communication is that Mike Wazowski never calls the child by, like, humane pronouns, if you will. He calls it and like it all the time, which is really funny to me because it's just a source of like how important communication is and how important the narrative of communication is, because like one of the smartest people in the movie, it doesn't even see the child as a child, and he sees it as an it, which is really funny to me. The narrative is about collecting the screams and everything like that, and making sure that scream power is the most important thing in our society, in their society I should say. Sully is really only worried about how this could destroy the company, which is, dog, you got so much more to live for. Also, in this little scenario here, they mention banishment, seems like the highest form of punishment, banishing somebody from their monster world life, which makes sense, and they have no chance to getting back into it. Maybe we should look into that as a society. Nah. Also, the FBI equivalent, the CDA, Child Detection Agency, mentions a number 1. I hope you got more pins, because you're putting a pin in that. We see Roz again. We love Roz. Roz is a great communicator. In fact, when she doesn't want to see Mike, she injures him. We have another fun comical point here, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up. Put that thing back where it came from, or so help me. The musical, written by Mike Wazowski. It's time for an intermission break. I don't know how blaringly obvious it is, but I've never really worked for a giant corporation like that, and I just need to bring in some outside help here. So this is my friend Allie, and she's going to discuss how she thinks Monsters Inc. portrays corporate life, and if it's accurate or not, and also like how do you interact with it whilst at your corporate life.
Okay, so granted, I haven't worked for a huge corporation, but I did have a summer internship at a fairly big transportation authority, and I would have to say, like, in my experience with Monsters Inc., there is, some, like, top-down level of organization within the authority that I worked in, and I think within Monsters Inc., it is fairly accurate. There are some people who are, of course, favored over others, and, I do just kind of think that, like, Monsters Inc. has a fairly, they kind of know what's going on, but I do think that I hope some organizations, especially with the end of the film, take into account that sometimes there needs to be changes within their industry.
Awesome. And how would you say that, like, when you're going into your corporate such jobs, do you think of Monsters Inc. as an escape, or do you think of it, like, how do you interact with it while you're there?
I would have to say, like, I do kind of, I don't know, I think the fairy tale ending is more of the escape within corporate life.
Awesome. And that has been our Call a Friend intermission. Let's get back to the rest of the video. Thank you so much, Allie.
Of course.
Water News slander time! So one of the things I find really interesting is that in the factory, there's pictures and paintings of Waternoose, the CEO, and, like, you can just tell who really is controlling the narrative. I don't see no Sully pictures up there. I don't see any Mike Wazowski pictures up there. It's all Waternoose. My guy is controlling the narrative. Also, Sully gets stopped to sign autographs. Are the scares televised? Do we have a camera crew in the completely toxic place? How bad is your propaganda? I can't with these guys. Also, another thing about the management being bad at managing. Maybe they're too focused on controlling the narrative. But, like, is Sully clocked into work during this whole time period that he lets Boo in and, like, is freaking out, like, throughout the factory? Like, is he getting paid for this? I mean, like, good for you, man. Like, you're so on the bottom. I want you to not participate in the system. Are you getting paid for this? Is that ethical? Like, I know we're stealing screams from children and that's unethical, but is it ethical to, like, not get paid? Like, what's on, man? What's going on? What are you doing, management? Are you controlling the narrative too much? What are you doing? Get back to managing. So why was the door out of place? Great question. And it's Randall. Yeah, that's right. He is the one that is taking the doors out of place. But why is he? You know, I know that he's competing for the all-time scare record. Is that the reason? I don't know. We'll have to watch more of the movie. Randall is actually trying to revolutionize the scaring industry. And how could you revolutionize an already unethical industry? That's right. You make it more unethical. Ba-bam! So he has this device that he's going to attach to children and literally suck out the screams from them, almost like a Dementor from Harry Potter. Just Like, that's crazy unethical, but crazy. Why is Randall wanting to do that? Well, that's because this top-down communication just simply isn't working. Randall wants to be the top. Now, I commend his efforts for trying to take down this bad management, because frankly they're bad at managing, but I think replacing them with just you being manager, that's probably, like, the same thing's probably gonna happen to you, Randall. Come on, control your own narrative better. That's today's lesson. Control your narrative. So Mike and Sully are obviously distraught. And again, who is the one controlling this whole narrative, this whole movie? That's right, Waternoose, or at least he's the figurehead of who controls the narrative. So imagine that you've grown up in a society with propaganda your whole life. I might not have to imagine. But anyway, you've grown up in a society with propaganda your whole life. What are you going to do? You're going to go back to the place that you feel safe. And you feel safe from the one that's controlling the narrative. That's right, Mike and Sully go straight to Waternoose with their problem. And I don't know if you have picked up on this, but Waternoose is not the best guy. And yeah, that's right, Waternoose is a part of the problem. Oh no, Waternoose is aware that of the Scream shortage, and he wants to make it not happen anymore. And he is willing, unpin one of those pins, guys. Oh yeah, get excited, we're unpinning a pin. He is willing to do anything for the company to make it not go under. And that means unethical things. They go straight to Waternoose, and Waternoose, being the Waternoose he banishes them, right? Yeah, so sad. They get a banish with the Abominable Snowman, who is played by John Ratzenberg, who's in every single Pixar movie. Just want to put that out there. And so they get banished, and they're so depressed. Sully's depressed because he, met Boo, and he really connected with Boo. Mike is depressed because literally everything that he's ever worked for is just poof, gone. And his best friend is caring about this toddler and not him. Not to say that Mike doesn't care about the toddler, but he's like, yo, we lived a whole life together. Like, care about me too, dude. Not just Boo. We buddies. And they go into this fight, and Sully goes, I'm sorry, we just need to go find Boo. And he uses we because he still sees that, he still thinks that Mike and him are on the same level. But Mike, in an awesome form of communication, goes, we? Whoa, we? No, because you made this about you, and this is a you problem now. And that just shows how important communication is. So they go into this chase scene with Randall and Boo, because Randall currently has Boo. And how they get to this chase scene is really kind of intuitive. During the banishment process, they figure out that there's a village down there, and village means children, and children means unethical monsters stealing screams. Sully goes into one of the child's doors and gets back into the monster world, which, why hasn't anybody else in banishment ever figured this out? That just goes to show you that my man James P. Sullivan is the best. But I digress. They go back into the monster world, and they find Boo, and they find Boo with Randall. There's this awesome chase scene, and there's another great form of communication here where Randall's like, I'm so tired of you being number one, even though I don't know if you'd noticed this whole analysis. I've been saying they're actually on the bottom, and they're nowhere near number one, but Randall's in the propaganda too, and so he's like, I'm so tired of you being number one, I'm gonna be number one now, and I'm blah 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 blah, and it's this crazy epic scene. But the best part of it comes out, Mike and Sully obviously come out on top, and they save Boo because they're the only ethical people in this godforsaken movie. But one of the best scenes come out of it, and they throw Randall in this trailer park in Florida, I'm assuming. And they throw him in this trailer park in Florida, and the couple that they get that he gets thrown into the trailer, like the couple's trailer, is like, the gators come out again, and they just think that Randall's a gator, and they chase him out with brooms, and it's a great scene. Sully and Boo's relationship is obviously supposed to be like a father-daughter relationship, and it's a very cute one. They're very cute with each other. It's very cute how he gets on his level, or gets on her level, to communicate with her, and their communication, even though she can't talk, and he doesn't know how to talk to her is very cute, and it's very wholesome, very wholesome communication. Waternoose finds Sully and Mike again, and oh my god, here we go, Waternoose. Everybody, all my homies hate Waternoose. All of my homies hate Waternoose. And so Waternoose finds Sully and Mike, and he's like, Sullivan, give me the child. And that's another thing here. We are almost done with the movie, and my guy Waternoose has never once called Sully by his nickname. He's always like Sullivan, James, stuff like that. And like, I think that's more up to the point of him trying to make him feel like he's still in control, like Sully's still in control, but Sully's never been in control, and Waternoose knows that. And so, this is like a last-ditch effort of Waternoose to still feel like he's in power by making Sully feel like he's in power. And there's a Freudian slip here that Waternoose does. He goes, I would kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die. And here's the thing. My guys, Mike and Sully, trapped Waternoose in the simulation. That's right, it's a full circle moment. So they trap Waternoose in the simulation, and they're going on record. They have on record that Waternoose is a bad dude. Like, I'm sorry, my guy, you no longer control the narration, because like there's no way that you can control the narrative now. There's no way. Like you're on record saying an awful thing that most people would not even in a million years agree with. And even people that have been fed your propaganda their whole entire lives won't agree with that. Like, it's super bad to kidnap children. Super awful. And that is a turning point in the movie, and he no longer controls the narrative. Do you remember one of those pins? One of those pins is that the CDA, FBA, Child Detection Agency, has a number 1. And we finally get to see who the number 1 is. And it's somebody who has always been watching, Wazowski. That's right, the number 1 is Roz, our queen. Our queen Roz has been watching this narrative the whole time and trying to stop it. She's the best character in the movie, hands down. I mean, I love Sully, but like, somebody is trying to make the world a better place, and it's Roz, and we need to respect the Rozes in our community. I'm just saying. So, is Roz now controlling the narrative? Yes, I think so, because she's in charge of the CDA. Here's the one thing. I was just praising Roz, but I don't know how much of a good person she is, because she doesn't erase all the toxic propaganda. So basically what happens is, throughout the course of the movie, we discover that laughter is actually a better source of energy than scream, and it's a much more ethical source of energy. So the scarers turn into comedians, and they go into the human world to get comedy, get laughs, and get power. Do the rest of the world still think that humans are toxic? I want to know what the ramifications of this are. And if you want to know what the ramifications of this are, go to Walt Disney World in Tomorrowland, and you can go on Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor. I've been there a few times. I'm just gonna say I've been chosen every single time I go there. That's all I gotta say. So now Mike and Sully are in charge of the narrative. Woohoo! We love those guys. They're ethical. One could also argue that Roz is part of the narrative, being the head of the CDA, which I don't know. I mean, like, I respect Roz for wanting to keep her job, but, like, human children aren't toxic. Like, we kind of discovered that. But, hey, get your bag, girl. Yeah, no. Now Mike and Sully are in charge of the narrative, and I'm actually here for it, because getting laughter from children is much more ethical, and they are the CEOs of Monsters Incorporated, and they go in and day out, and they get laughter themselves. Like, they are working bosses, and we love that, because I feel like the company is now set up more from a bottom-top communications stream source, because I feel like Mike and Sully are more aware of what the hard blue collar workers are doing every single day, because they're in the trenches with them, and hopefully that they are going to take in more of their viewpoints and let them make decisions about how the company, and ergo how the society is ran, because the company is an anchor point of their society. And the last point of the movie, we get to see Boo's door reconstructed again by Mike. We get to see Sully open the door, and I think that is the crux of this whole entire movie, is that we're left with an open door, and we're left with open communication and a narrative that hopefully everyone can make for themselves.